Hey everybody, it is October 4th, 2010. I'm Sonic Suns, and I'm continuing the discussion regarding Greg Craven and the policy Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Mr. Craven, you posted up your original video plus an addendum. I posted a video response, and you posted another video responding to all of your critics, not me in particular, and I'm continuing from there. Now, in your initial video, you stated that you think the current Democratic push to overthrow, or rather repeal, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a horrible idea. And you say this was not about bigotry, but it was about separate reasons, and there's two main reasons as I perceived it. Reason number one was that repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell could have an adverse effect on the morale and effectiveness of our armed forces, and that we cannot make a reasonable judgment about that situation until we have more data, more information on the subject. Reason number two was that we have other things to worry about which are much higher priority, and that somehow by repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or spending the effort necessary to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we are jeopardizing these other more important objectives, for instance, dealing with global climate change, dealing with financial instability, things like that. Now, I'm a little confused as to your current stance on argument number one there. Because in your first video, you said this.
What we need in order to make a rational, pragmatic decision about the law is some information about whether it really is bad for morale or effectiveness.
So what we need, you say, is some information. In other words, we don't currently have enough information. And it's possible there could be some significant adverse effect. In fact, you followed up with a comment on my video. You wrote, quote, "The problem is the redneck heterosexual attitudes of some of the rest of the service members, which may result in a compromise in the unit's ability to perform." Got that? Yes, Mr. Craven, I do got that. I understand the idea that allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly in the military might cause a problem for unit effectiveness, unit ability, unit morale, unit cohesion, all of these related concepts, of course. Which is why we need to have some data to better understand what effect this would really have in the real world. And I thought that was your stance on the issue. We need more data. But then, in your most recent video, you said this.
Let me make this clear. I think gays, lesbians, and bisexuals should be allowed to serve in the military openly right now.
I'm confused, Mr. Craven. Just a couple of days ago, you said that allowing gays and lesbians to serve in the military openly could have adverse consequences for the way the military functions, and that we could not make a rational judgment on this issue until we had more data. And yet, in your most recent video, you seem to give a blanket statement that we ought to allow them, even though you haven't brought up any data that supposedly we need. In fact, later in that same video, you indicate that more data is needed.
So I think we really do need the data as to what it would do to our military and their current effectiveness.
But if we need more data in order to figure out what effect this would have on the military, why did you state earlier in the video that we ought to just let the gays and lesbians serve right now?
I think gays, lesbians, and bisexuals should be allowed to serve in the military openly right now.
Perhaps when you made that statement, you were making it on the presumption of a sort of fantasy universe in which homophobia doesn't exist, and you were just merely reiterating essentially that you're not a bigot and you don't want to keep them out for no good reason. But if that's the premise you were working with, sir, you really should have communicated more clearly. The way you said it, it really sounded like a contradiction. On the one hand, you've told us multiple times that we need more data in order to figure this out. And now you're saying that we ought to allow gays and lesbians, despite the fact you haven't offered any new data to prove that conclusion. It's like you're saying we need more data, and also we don't need more data. I'm a little confused what you're trying to say. Let me put it another way. Supposing you had a magic wand, and you could wave this magic wand, and it would repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the gays would be allowed to serve openly, and this would cost nothing in political capital, and would not in any way jeopardize more important things like dealing with global climate change, etc. Imagine also that this wand does nothing to combat homophobia, and so any risks that exist with regards to unit morale and cohesion and effectiveness, those risks would remain. Would you wave the wand then, sir? Would you go ahead and, allow gays to serve openly and take the risk of whatever trouble there might be with homophobia in the ranks? Or would you hesitate and say, I really need more data on unit effectiveness, morale, and cohesion? I'd like to know exactly what you're thinking on that. And if indeed it's the latter, if indeed you believe that we don't have enough data in order to know what this would do to the military, and therefore we should hesitate for that reason, for that argument number one that I brought up, allow me to refer you to the data we already have. For instance, of course, there's other nations that have integrated their forces, and you addressed this point in your most recent video.
We all know that cultural attitudes towards gays and lesbians are much more conservative in the U.S. than in even Canada, and especially most of Western Europe. And this is fundamentally a cultural issue, or rather, it's cultural reasons that would have an impact on military effectiveness and morale.
Now, that's a fairly reasonable argument. I understand that the United States at the present time is more conservative than Canada or Western Europe. So what it seems then we need is advice from the experts. We need to find the brightest minds in the field of psychology, sociology, and so forth, and have them study specifically what effect repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell would have on the American armed services. Right? That's what we need. We need data from the experts. And we have data, and I brought it up in my previous video. I quoted a statement from a prestigious psychological association which has studied this quite thoroughly. A statement from the American Psychological Association, which within the statement quotes a large number of studies. I'll skip over the names of the studies, but I'll read to you their conclusions. Quote, "Empirical evidence fails to show that sexual orientation is germane to any aspect of military effectiveness, including unit cohesion, morale, recruitment, and retention. Comparative data from foreign militaries and domestic police and fire departments show that when lesbians, gay men, and bisexuals are allowed to serve openly, there is no evidence of disruption or loss of mission effectiveness. When openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals have been allowed to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces, which has happened, there has been no evidence of disruption or loss of mission effectiveness. The U.S. military is capable of integrating members of groups historically excluded from its ranks, as demonstrated by its success in reducing both racial and gender discrimination." There it is, Mr. Craven. There's the data. And it's not based on foreign governments. You notice, of course, they mentioned foreign governments, but they also talked about the United States specifically, and how the United States specifically would react to this. And according to the major studies done by the American Psychological Association, it's not really a problem. According to the best experts I've been able to find, we're going to be okay. Unit effectiveness, unit morale, cohesion, recruitment, retention, it's all going to be pretty much okay. I'd really like to know, sir, what is your reaction to the scientific data that I've just cited, and more data that I cited in my previous video, which shows that Don't Ask, Don't Tell is a bad idea? Because I'm pretty sure the only logical conclusion is that argument number one really doesn't make sense.